freaking goodness. Happy football Sunday to all of you. And man, as I'm getting ready for the Cowboys and Patriots later on today, we get some big news, huge news, gigantic news for the Boston Celtics on this Sunday. They have acquired Jrue Holiday. That's right. The Celtics acquired Jrue Holiday. Adrian Wojnarowski tweeted about this or posted about this just a few moments ago. And I like to say, everybody joining me here live, I appreciate it. We're going to just kick this thing off. If you have comments, feel free to jump in the comments and let me know how you feel about this trade, whether you like it, love it, hate it, whichever, however you feel. I'm not going to pass judgment. You're going to fan, as they say. So let's get to Adrian Wojnarowski's posts from just a little while ago. Celtics trading Robert Williams, Malcolm Brogdon, 2024 Golden State Warriors first-round pick, which has some protections, a 2029 unprotected first-round pick from the Celtics. That all goes to Portland. So it's Rob Williams, Malcolm Brogdon, that Golden State pick that they got in the Marcus Smart trade, and then a 2029 unprotected first-round pick to the Trailblazers. And the Celtics land Jrue Holiday, which is obviously a gigantic stroke here by Brad Stevens, a big, big move. Here's another note from Adrian Wojnarowski. The Celtics were among the teams at the very top of Holiday's wish list in recent days, and expectations are that the Celtics are eager to retain Holiday long-term. Sources said Holiday has a year left on the deal. Boston beat out several teams in both conferences with a significant trade package. So Jrue Holiday is a Celtic, and he's not just a Celtic right now. He's a Celtic, according to Woj. He's going to be a Celtic for the next couple of years. This sounds like it's going to be a long-term relationship between player and team, which is fascinating on a number of different levels. My first reaction to this was I wasn't surprised. I wasn't surprised whatsoever that this trade was made. You go back to a few days ago, Nick Cattle's show here on Apple Pods, Spotify, also, of course, here on YouTube. You can leave your comments. We talked about this trade being a possibility, and I actually posted on X a possible deal. My deal was Malcolm Brogdon, Al Horford, and Sam Hauser to go along with a couple of first-round picks. So it's not necessarily shocking that you have this trade happen. I think many people are shocked that Rob Williams is the piece, but if you told me a few days ago this was going to be the trade, it would not knock me over. It would not knock me over whatsoever. And, you know, the proof is on X. We tweeted it out a few days ago. So here's the first thing I'll say before I break this trade down in totality. I have a lot of thoughts. I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts. I love Jrue Holiday. That's my disclaimer. That's my caveat. I love Holiday. I've loved Jrue Holiday for the last number of years. He's one of my favorite NBA players. I enjoy watching him play. I understand that there's some playoff numbers where he hasn't been great. There's been some issues in the playoffs. I understand all of that. But I have loved Jrue Holiday for a long time. I've loved him going back to New Orleans. So that's the caveat. That's the disclaimer. I'm telling you, I am a Jrue Holiday fan, so I am likely going to like this move or love this move more than some others will. So first of all, let's start with Brad Stevens. My man is a mercenary. Brad Stevens is a mercenary, and he's aiming for one thing. This move tells everybody. It tells the NBA. It tells everybody that's on the Celtics. It tells everybody in that organization. It tells the fans. This move tells everybody that Brad Stevens has one goal in mind, and he's willing to do whatever it takes to get to that goal, and that's win a championship. After years of Danny Ainge not pulling the trigger on trades and wondering if Trader Danny was actually a thing, here we have Stevens, who consistently trades big names for other big names. Think about what this guy's done since he's come to Boston in that role or moved up in that role. Think about every single offseason, he has a big trade or two. Stevens is not concerned. He's not worried about how you feel. He's willing to trade Marcus Smart. He's willing to bring in Kristaps Porzingis. He's willing to trade Kemba for Al Horford. He's willing to trade for Malcolm Brogdon. And now he's willing to trade all of these pieces for Jrue Holiday. Stevens is a guy who goes for it. And whether you agree with this move or not, you have to love the idea that you have a president of basketball operations who is not afraid to make a move. He is willing to do whatever it takes to make this team a championship contender. And that means an awful lot. Secondly, I've seen some people talk about how this ownership group doesn't want to spend the money. Yeah, you can throw that away now, can't you? Think about what this ownership has done. They gave Tatum the big-time extension years ago. They just gave Jaylen Brown the biggest contract in NBA history. They are going to pay Jason Tatum the biggest contract in history when he is set to make that money. They traded for Kristaps Porzingis and gave him a big-time extension, 2 years, $60 million. They make the trade and bring in Jrue Holiday, and they're going to pay him money. And on top of the money that they're going to pay him this year, which is over $30 million, they're also going to pay, according to Woj, they're willing to extend Holiday long-term on a contract. So this idea that ownership and Wyc Grousbeck will not spend, it is a false premise. If anybody starts a conversation with that, give me a break. This ownership is spending money. They spend some of the most that you'll see a team spend in the NBA. So this ownership group, along with Brad Stevens, wanting to win a championship, they're putting their money where their mouth is. And you should be happy about that. If you're a Celtics fan, you should be thrilled that you have a GM that has the guts to pull off these trades, and you have an ownership group that is willing to spend as much money that they have to win a championship. So those are the first two thoughts. Now let's get to Jrue Holiday. Front office ownership, thumbs up for willing to do a move like this. Jrue Holiday, he makes this team better. And hi, Nikki the GOAT. I see your comments there. Appreciate you swinging in and checking us out. Jrue Holiday makes this team better. He's going to make this team different. Rob Williams is out, okay? Now, defensively, that's going to change this team. Defensively, this is going to be a perimeter-based defensive attack. You know that Rob can float around and he can play great help defense. The thought process, I think, here is that you bring in Jrue Holiday to go along with Derek White in the backcourt, and now you're changing your defensive philosophy because what you're doing is you are going to put all the pressure on the perimeter. And I know that, Rob Williams is beloved and he's played some great basketball. And when he's been on the floor, this defense has been terrific. But now the defense has the ability to be really good. It's just going to be different. You're going to have Derek White and Jrue Holiday causing all sorts of problems on the perimeter for opposing guards, okay? Now Damian Lillard of Milwaukee has to worry about Derek White. And if he gets by Derek White, he has to worry about Holiday. You are going to force teams to make uncomfortable passes, entry passes down in the post. You're going to force them to take tough shots on the perimeter. Now you have four guys at the top that you can deploy that is going to be very difficult for offenses to deal with. 1 through 4, and we haven't even gotten to Horford just yet or Porzingis, but just focus on 1 through 4. Think about defensively what this team can do 1 through 4. You want to talk about switching, the switchability of Holiday and White and Brown and Tatum. They can defend a bunch of different pieces. So this defense is going to look different. It's not necessarily going to be worse. It might take a slide at the beginning as they get used to this thing, but defensively, we're going to talk about now guards and wings defensively versus the bigs defensively. So Jrue Holiday, his perimeter defense, his presence at the top is going to be a big-time add. And when you get into a playoff series, when you have Holiday and White, my goodness, good luck to any guard or guards that want to deal with that. Those two guys are going to pester and bother you constantly for 48 minutes. So the perimeter defense that they lost with Marcus Smart, you trade Marcus Smart and you give up some of that perimeter defense. You give up some of that defensive versatility. You give up some of that, edginess, and some would say leadership. You have now replaced that with Jrue Holiday. Holiday is now the replacement for Marcus Smart, and I think he's a better basketball player than Marcus Smart. He's a better overall player, and I was a Smart fan. I watched Smart a lot at Oklahoma State. Loved them coming out of college. But now you replace Marcus Smart with Jrue Holiday, and you don't lose that defensive intensity, that defensive pressure at the top. And now you have Derek White to play alongside. So you also have somebody who can knock down a shot. And I know that his postseason numbers have not been great. They haven't been efficient. But Jrue Holiday is a better offensive player than Smart. All of us can agree on that. Holiday is better, significantly better than Smart. And I know we can sit there and we can look at some statistics. I'm just telling you, as the fourth option offensively for this team, Holiday is going to fit in perfectly. He's a guy that can knock down a shot. He's a guy that can play in the post, which I think is overlooked. Holiday has a solid frame. He is physically imposing for his position. He's somebody that can play in the post and play with both hands. So, again, this team's going to look different. But when you look at what Holiday brings to the table, he replaces that defensive side of Smart, and he adds more offense than Smart did. Guys, I'm telling you right now, guys in the league, teams are not going to look at Jrue Holiday like they looked at Smart. They allowed Smart to jack up all those threes. They weren't afraid of Smart knocking down open threes. They gave him that shot. That's going to change. You have Holiday and White on the perimeter, and now the spacing is ridiculous offensively, because if you start five of Holiday, White, Brown, Tatum, and Porzingis, your spacing is incredible offensively. All five of those guys can shoot, but also you have Porzingis who can play in the post. You have Holiday who can play in the post, and you have Tatum who hopefully will have more mid-post touches this year than he had the last couple of seasons. So you can still play some in the paint with your guards and your forwards and replace some of that. We know Rob Williams, he was defensively really good, and he was a really good rebounder. But offensively, there were some spacing issues, and, Rob couldn't give you an overall offensive game that made him dangerous. And when you were playing Smart and Williams on the floor at the same time, those were two guys that defenses weren't necessarily bothered by or worried about. And that brings more traffic to Brown and Tatum. You tell me now, defensively, who are you going to lay off on this team? You talk about a postseason series. Are you going to be able to double Tatum and Brown, or Brown? Are you going to be able to double one of those guys when you have Holiday, Derek White, and Porzingis on the floor at the same time? No, you can't. You can't double anybody. The spacing and the amount of breath that Tatum and Brown can now take out there on the floor is going to make a huge difference. Jrue Holiday makes this team better as a fourth option. Also about Holiday, and I'll get to your comments. I see you guys filing in. I will get to those comments. I'm going to run through some of my thoughts and then look at some of your questions and thoughts as well as we continue here. Nick Cattle Show, special breaking news edition of the podcast here. If you haven't listened to me or seen me before, it's easy. Apple Pods, Spotify, YouTube. You can check me out, Nick Cattle Show, Monday through Friday, about 30 minutes each episode. Breaking news, Celtics add Jrue Holiday, trading Rob Williams and a couple of first-round picks along with Malcolm Brogdon. That deal is done. Holiday is a Celtic. Another thing I like about the Holiday addition, and I'm going to get to some of the questions that I have about this move as well, but another thing that I like about the Holiday addition is this guy's a leader. He's won a championship. As much as we love Al Horford, Horford hasn't won a title at the NBA level. You bring in somebody in Holiday who has won a title. He's won a championship. He knows what it takes to win. He can tell the guys in that locker room, and guys will have to listen and respect it and appreciate it because he's been there and he's done that. And that is a different thing. When Marcus Smart is in the locker room trying to tell guys what they have to do to win, I'm not telling you they don't listen to him. But in the back of the mind, some of those guys have to be wondering, okay, yeah, but what have you won, Marcus? I saw you miss those threes in the fourth quarter. I saw you do this. I saw you do that. It doesn't have as much credibility. Holiday brings credibility. When he sits there and he talks to Jason Tatum and he talks to Brown, he talks to these other guys, and he says, look, this is what we had to do to win a championship in Milwaukee. This is what needed to be done. He's a guy that has done it. That is instant credibility. One more thing about Holiday. He doesn't have an ego, and that is a big thing. This is clearly, and it should be, Tatum and Brown's team. And part of the issue, as much as I loved Marcus Smart, part of the issue with Smart was that his ego was bigger than his level of play. He was a guy who thought he was better than he was, especially offensively. And so now you bring in Holiday, who has almost zero ego, is going to fit in with the program and understand, all right, this is what I got to do. I'm the fourth option offensively. I've got to defend. He's going to do the small things and not be worried about the glory, not be worried about giving the credit. He's just going to go out there and do his freaking job, which is apropos on a Sunday during NFL season. Now, long-term is interesting Because if you thought this move was made and it was going to be, hey, a 1 year we're all in type of situation, not necessarily according to Adrian Wojnarowski. When you look at this deal, again, for those joining me, Woj tweeted out or posted on X just a little while ago that the Celtics were at the top of the wish list for Jrue Holiday. He had his list of preferred destinations. We talked about it on the pod this week. He had a list of preferred destinations, and the Celtics were on that list, according to Woj. And look, this might be some post-trade, oh, we love Boston type of stuff. But according to Woj, Holiday had the Celtics at the very top of his list. He wanted to come to Boston. He wanted to be here. He wanted to play with Tatum and Brown. We heard all the stuff about Dame Dollar not wanting to be in Boston and all that stuff. Holiday wanted to be here, which I think matters. He's a motivated guy. He wants to prove to Milwaukee that they made a mistake by trading him. And what better way to make that point to the Bucks than joining the Celtics and hopefully meeting the Bucks in the playoffs and saying, okay, now me versus you, Dame Dollar. I'm going to prove to everybody that they should not have traded me. But Woj says that, these guys want to have a long-term relationship, the Celtics and Holiday, which is interesting because I don't think you're going to be able to hold all four guys, right? I don't think you can do Holiday, Tatum, Brown, and Porzingis long-term. Maybe, but I find it difficult, especially with the second apron, the new CBA rules. I find it difficult that all four guys will be on this roster a year, 2 years from now. So which guy is gone or which two guys are gone, that's a problem for another day. I will say that there's lots of options. Because if you're Brad Stevens, Mike Zarin, that front office, if you're the ownership, if we're looking at this roster, you have options. You have options, and you can sit there and you can say, well, okay, now we trade Porzingis for a couple of pieces. Or we'll trade, Jrue Holiday down the road for a couple of pieces. You have big contracts that you can deal and bring back 2 or 3 guys and make the team deeper down the road, which I think is something that we can't overlook. All right, let's get to some of these questions here from, wait a minute, bro, how many players do the Celtics need on the roster? Well, I think you've got to look at top-end talent, right? I think you've got to look at this idea that you're always trying to improve. The Bucks just added Lillard. Many people thought that made the Bucks better than the Celtics and made them the favorites. I wasn't necessarily sold on that. I think it was pretty close before this trade. I think the Celtics are better now after this trade. Raphael, John Chua chips in. This is a question I'm sure a lot of you have. Why not Horford instead of Williams? Well, number one, let's talk about Rob Williams. His availability is a thing, folks. The most games that he has played as a Boston Celtic, 61. You have not been able to depend on Time Lord. As much as I love the guy and as much as I love what he brings defensively to the table, he just has not been somebody who's been dependable. He's playing 40 games a year. He's playing 50 games a year. He's playing 60 games a year. In the playoffs, he's not always healthy. It's actually the opposite. He's hardly ever healthy. So when you get to the postseason, you can't lean on Williams. And, Rob Williams has been more hypothetical at times than actual. You have to hope that he stays healthy to be able to help you defend and rebound. But he hasn't been out on the floor. And I know Horford is aged. I know, he's 37, 38 years old. But Horford gives you more dependability than Williams does. Because Horford, even though he's aged, he's a guy that is going to play for you. And that's been proven throughout his career. And that's been proven here in Boston. Horford's going to play. Also, Horford is a better matchup against bigger guys. Think about who you're playing against in the Eastern Conference, right? Horford has been able to show that he can defend all of them. He has been able to show that he can defend Bam Adebayo. Horford does a fantastic job. I'd argue Horford does the best job in the NBA defending Joel Embiid. If you want to move on, if you're playing Philly in a playoff series, one of the guys, if not the guy you're going to defend Joel Embiid with is Horford. If you remove Horford from that equation, now you have Rob Williams defending Joel Embiid, and Williams doesn't do a great job at defending bigger, stronger, physical centers. That's been Horford. So if you lose Horford instead of Williams, you have no answer for Joel Embiid. How about Brook Lopez? That's another guy that Horford can kind of bother down low. So when you look at the matchups in the Eastern Conference, in the big men in the East, Horford is a much better matchup defensively than Rob Williams is. Rob Williams is a great help defender. He's a very good defender in space. He's a good rim protector. But mano a mano against bigger guys in the post, he struggles because he's not physically strong enough to handle some of those guys. I also think you look at Horford as a leader of this team. You look at the fact that they gave him an extension last season, and I wonder if, Stevens didn't want to trade Horford after giving him that extension. Maybe he thought it would not look great. But also you have to remember, Raphael, Portland wants Rob Williams. If you're Portland, you want the 24, 25-year-old, young guy who you can say, hey, he can be, if he's healthy, he can be our starting five, or he can play along with DeAndre Ayton. Pretty interesting mix there. Ayton, though, can spread the floor a little bit. But if you're Portland, you're looking at the younger guy, right? If you make this trade and you bring in Horford, Horford's not going to do anything. You know what's going to happen with Horford? Horford's going to get bought out by Portland, and he's going to go sign with a team to try to win a championship. Portland wanted a valuable asset in return. Rob Williams is somebody that a young team like them can try to build upon. He's somebody that is interesting, exciting, and sexy to the Blazers, not so much Horford. So that's the other part, right? I don't know if you can make this deal if it's just Horford. I don't know if you can do it. Like, does this deal happen? Let me ask you this question, Celtics fans, NBA fans. Does this trade happen today? Celtics getting Jrue Holiday. Does this trade happen if the Celtics feel like they could depend on Rob Williams? If the Celtics knew Rob Williams was going to play 70 games a year, if Rob Williams, if his resume showed that he gives you 70 games a season and that he's healthy in the postseason and that you can depend on him to play 30, 35 minutes instead of managing his minutes in the postseason like last year at times. If the Celtics had Rob Williams and they thought that he was going to be that dependable kind of guy, I don't know if this trade happens. But the fact is, Time Lord, as fun as he is and as much as we have loved watching him play when he's been out there, he just has not been consistently out there. That has to weigh in. It has to weigh in. Now, a part of this, no doubt about it, is the lack of depth down low for the C's. I think all of us now look at this roster and go, you need a big man. You need at least one big man who can play legitimate minutes in the NBA. You have Kristaps Porzingis and Horford. Porzingis, his injury history is his injury history. The stuff that I just said about Rob Williams, you could say some of that, if not all of it, regarding Porzingis as well. So you have Porzingis and you have an older Al Horford. Those are your only guys down low right now. Luke Kornet, I'm sorry, I'm not including you, Luke. Sorry, you're a fun guy. You seem to be loved by the team. I'm not counting on Kornet to do anything in a postseason. So you have to add. It's vital with this move. Stevens has to go out and find a big. Is it Blake Griffin? I love bringing Blake Griffin back, playing him 10 to 15 minutes a night. So is Blake Griffin on the radar? Does Griffin look at this and go, oh, wait a minute, they just added Jrue Holiday? They're going to be the favorites now. Okay, I'll sign with you guys for another year because I have a chance at the chip. So you go out and maybe you sign Blake Griffin. And you still have the traded player exceptions. I think you've got about $6.5 million in that traded player exception. So, maybe you're able to utilize that and go get a bench big. But what Brad Stevens is saying, he's saying we're going all in. Jrue Holiday is a perfect fit for this basketball team. And yes, we're thin down low, but we're going to figure that out as the season progresses. I mean, the thing is this is October. We're October 1st. Season doesn't tip off for another few weeks. The deadline isn't until February. You have plenty of options to look at. B. Sieb says it worked out brilliantly for Portland. Yeah, if you look at the entire package that Portland got now, they trade Lillard and they bring back Holiday. They trade Holiday. They get assets for Lillard and Holiday. They got 4 or 5 first-round picks, a number of them unprotected. That Golden State pick, I think, is very valuable. Rob Williams comes in. DeAndre Ayton comes in. I think Portland did pretty well. Kyle Parker, LFG. Blazers, we got the trade I wanted. So there you go, Kyle. You should be happy. You should be pumped. Culture canceled says that I don't like trading Williams, but I understand it. Yeah, I mean, look, you got to give to get. If you're going to trade somebody and acquire somebody like Jrue Holiday, you're going to give up something of consequence. You're going to give up value. So Rob Williams, I think the lack of dependability with him, the injury history, made him expendable to the Celtics, even though it made you a little thin in the front court, because you could say, okay, yeah, Rob Williams is going to play for us, but he's going to give us like 50 games. What if we go out and we get a backup big who can give us 75 games or 70 games? KP and Horford have to remain healthy. Porzingis has to be healthy. Horford has to be healthy. Stevens has to add that third dependable big. The picks, look, Golden State, that Golden State pick is very valuable if they implode. Obviously, Golden State has zero reason to implode or not try to win. And as we've seen, their ownership group is willing to spend. Their front office is willing to pull the trigger on moves. So I think the Golden State pick is very valuable. It is, because there's a scenario where Golden State, you just saw Draymond Green's going to be out for 4 to 6 weeks already. There's a scenario where Golden State kind of falls back and they don't play as well. They're older. There's a scenario, but there's also the scenario that they're just going to keep competing with Steph Curry. They'll add pieces around him. Those younger guys and Kuminga and Moody will step up finally. So there's some scenarios there, but you trade it. You know, I mean, they have all the reasons to compete. The 2029 unprotected first round pick, talk to me in 2029. You're trying to win a championship right now. And I don't see anything from Stevens or this ownership group. I don't see any evidence that they're going to take their foot off the gas. They want to compete. So I think that will continue to be the thing, is just competing. I also want to talk about Malcolm Brogdon, because I think a big piece to this is also the fact that Brogdon wasn't happy. All of us can see that. All of us can understand that. Brogdon was not happy being with the Celtics anymore. He was not around. If you look at social media, there was no really mentions of Malcolm Brogdon. And what really jumped out at me this week was Jared Weiss of The Athletic, when he wrote that the Celtics were still talking to the Clippers about possible Brogdon deals because they weren't sure if they had, quote unquote, singed the bridge. Wait a minute. The Porzingis trade happened 3-4 months ago. So you're telling me that 3 or 4 months after that trade, the Celtics still weren't sold that Brogdon was all in with this team. That's a problem. That's a major red flag. 3 or 4 months after the initial trade talks and all of those reports, you're telling me that the Celtics are still unsure if they burned the bridge with Brogdon. So they obviously, and Stevens had said during the week to Gary Washburn of the Globe, Stevens mentioned that they had several conversations with Brogdon since that trade broke down with the Clippers. So you spoke to Brogdon several times throughout the last 3 or 4 months, and you still weren't sold on the idea that this guy was all in, that this guy was going to buy in. That's a problem. I don't think the Celtics thought that Brogdon wanted to play here anymore, and that's his choice. But I think the Celtics looked at Brogdon and said, this guy might not be with us this year. So when you start to think about it, you've got Rob Williams, who might play 55 games for you this season. You have Brogdon, who's being a malcontent, doesn't really want to be on the team. So you trade those two guys who have huge questions. They have huge questions. You trade those two guys and the 2 picks to bring back somebody who, in Jrue Holiday, wanted to be here, was excited to be here, had you on top of his list. You see what's happening here? Stevens brought somebody in who is going to buy in. He brought somebody in who wants to win a championship, who is very motivated to prove the Bucks wrong. For a guy who didn't want to be here, and for a guy who wanted to be here, but has never been able to be here consistently on the court. The Brogdon piece of this is big. If you had Rob Williams playing 70 games a year, I don't know if you trade him. You look at Williams and you say, nah, man, early mid-20s guy, defender, rebounder. He fits with us. He loves playing in Boston. We want to keep Rob. But he doesn't play 70 games for you a year. And if you had a Malcolm Brogdon who was fully bought in, the sixth man of the year a season ago, who played some great basketball for you, if he was fully buying into the program, if he was able to get over his stuff with this front office, then I don't know if you trade Brogdon. But the fact is, Brogdon was unhappy. And they didn't want somebody who was unhappy messing up this locker room. They didn't want a guy going in there sulking all year. They didn't want to have somebody who knows, maybe 3 weeks, 4 weeks into the season says, ouchie, my elbow hurts, and sits down for a couple of weeks. So they had to remove the Malcolm Brogdon element, the unknown, or maybe even the known if you knew he wasn't happy. They had to remove him from the equation. Addition by subtraction, but on top of that, it's a big-time addition with Holiday. They had to look at Rob and say, we don't know if this guy's going to play 70 games this year. We don't know when we get to the postseason that he's going to be actually on the floor. The idea of Williams is much more exciting than the actual that you've gotten from the Time Lord, because he just hasn't played a lot. So the Brogdon part of this is pretty big in my estimation. Here's Vincent. Vincent Leonard weighs in. I agree, Brogdon was a good move, but Rob is a gamble. Rob's a gamble because of thin front court. If you add a name or two, I don't think it's that big of a gamble if you're able to address the depth of your bigs. Because Rob Williams, yeah, he was great 50 nights a year. The other 30, you're scrambling. You got to play Luke Cornett. So now it's going to be upon Brad Stevens and this front office to find big man depth. Go out there and sign a Blake Griffin. Go out there and make a move. And by the way, another part of this, and I'm going to wrap up in a few minutes. I'll get you ready for your football at 1:00. Again, Nick Cattle Show here, Apple Pod, Spotify, YouTube. Comment. Give us that like if you like what you're watching and listening to. Monday through Friday, we're here 30 minutes-ish a day. The Nick Cattle Show. And we're starting a Celtics podcast, by the way, on Wednesday. Cattle's on Causeway. That's coming up on Wednesday, first episode of that this season. Another part of this is, if you're worried about the big man depth, you should be. Legitimate concern, legitimate, reasonable counter to this move. You have several months to figure this out. You have several months to bring in somebody like a Blake Griffin. You have several months with that traded player exception to try to land some big man depth. You also have Jrue Holiday as part of this team now, and you are seen as the clear favorite in the Eastern Conference. And so when we talk about the deadline and we talk about buyouts, we talk about veterans trying to go to places, the Celtics are even sexier to these guys around the league because they're even better. Guys are going to look at this. Bigs are going to look at this, and they're going to say, wait a minute, I can go join a team with Jrue Holiday, Tatum, and Brown, and Porzingis. I could be the missing piece. I could be that added depth piece in the front court that will help them win the championship. I can help them get over the hump. Again, this move on October 1st gives you a lot of time to figure out what you can do to supplement Horford and Porzingis. I want you to think about this. In totality, the two big-time trades by Brad Stevens. Now, maybe I have something wrong here. I don't think I do. But the Celtics traded Marcus Smart, Malcolm Brogdon, Rob Williams, and Danilo Gallinari. Sorry to Mike Muscala. T's and P's. I'm not really putting you in this scenario. You traded Smart, Brogdon, Time Lord, and Gallo, and an unprotected pick in 2029. You sent those 5 pieces out. Smart, Brogdon, Williams, Gallo, unprotected pick in 2029. For those pieces, you brought back Kristaps Porzingis, Jrue Holiday, and a first-round pick. Think about that. You got the pick this year that you traded down, ended up acquiring Jordan Walsh in the draft. You got 2 picks in that Smart trade. The Golden State pick, I'm not really including, right? Because the Golden State pick, you did not have that pick before the Smart trade. You acquired the Warriors pick in the Smart trade, and then you just handed it off to Portland. So that asset, it just moved. It moved from you right to Portland. You traded, if I told you before the offseason began, if I told you that the Celtics added Kristaps Porzingis and Jrue Holiday and a first-round pick for Marcus Smart, Malcolm Brogdon, Rob Williams, and a guy who has a torn ACL and is in his mid-30s. What would you say about that? You easily got the two best players. There's no denying that. Porzingis is the best player in all of those names that I mentioned. Jrue Holiday is a close second to that. So you traded Smart, Brogdon, Rob Williams, Gallo, and a 2029 unprotected first-round pick, and you brought back Porzingis and Holiday, 2 All-Stars, and a first-round pick. In totality, that's what Brad Stevens did this offseason. Pretty good. I would think you start Holiday, White, Brown, Tatum, and Porzingis. I think that is your starting 5. You have Horford, the older guy coming off the bench, to back up Porzingis. Again, you're going to need some depth. O'Shea, Brissett. Some of these other guys are going to have to step up. They're going to have to step up until you find somebody. Lamar Stevens, I like that signing. Helps you defensively on the wing. But my starting 5 would be Holiday, White, Brown, Tatum, and Porzingis. That's the best starting 5 in the NBA. The Celtics have the best starting 5 in the NBA. And when you look at your bench, you now have, Horford coming off the bench, Pritchard coming off the bench. You still need a piece or two. You need some depth. But if you go 8 or 9 deep, you're fine, especially with that starting 5. Because that starting 5, if healthy, that starting 5 is playing 38 minutes a night, 40 minutes a night in the playoffs. And, you're going top heavy with your roster. There's no denying that. But that top heavy, your top 5 guys, it's unbelievable. This starting 5 is unbelievable. Fact. Where's the weakness? Jrue Holiday, Derek White, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, and Kristaps Porzingis? That's the best starting 5 in the league. Yes, you have to supplement it. You're going to have to go out there and find some depth in the front court. But that's the best starting 5 in basketball. This team, if healthy, is the clear favorite in the Eastern Conference. And that should be an exciting thing. Even though we have questions. We're going to have questions. But I love going all in. You're showing Tatum and Brown that you are serious, that you want to get this thing done, that you want to win a championship, and you're not going to stop until you do what you've got to do to win that championship. You have an ownership group now that every player in that locker room can say, they're spending money. Wyc Grousbeck wants to win as bad as I want to win, and that means something. Other guys in the NBA are watching. They're paying attention. That means something when your ownership is willing to pay the money. It means something when your front office is willing to go out there and make trades that might not be popular at all times, but they make the trades that they think are the trades that need to be made to make you a championship, a true championship contender, and a true championship roster. Jrue Holiday is a Boston Celtic. Everybody enjoy your football. Of course, Patriots Cowboys later on today at 4:25. We're back tomorrow with the Nick Cattle Show, sprinkling some more thoughts about this. We'll recap Patriots Cowboys as well. Apple Pods, Spotify, YouTube. Give us the rating, the review. Give us those likes, the thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel as well. Appreciate every single one of you taking out some time here on Football Sunday. Enjoy the football and be happy because the Celtics just added Jrue Holiday. That's a big time addition.